weird night in the hospital. Ghosts. Just like we already know, there are a lot of pros and cons about the existence of ghosts in this world. And on this occasion, I'm going to tell you a story, an experience that occurred to my father when he was 16, where he was treated in a hospital for 2 months because of his liver disease. He was treated in a middle-sized room that contained 3 beds. And because he had been there for 2 months, of course, their roommate kept changing. Even sometimes, roommate died in the room. So, that problem made my father's insomnia even worse. He slept almost every night at 3 a.m. in the morning. And on this particular night, he really tried to sleep, but he couldn't. Until one point, he decided to sit on the edge of his bed and start to observe the room. The room was very quiet and dark. The hallway was very quiet too. And then he suddenly felt that the temperature of the room was decreasing. And he thought to himself, why is this room suddenly feels cold? But he still continues his observation. After observing very well amount of time, he noticed that there was something odd on the room. On the edge of his eyesight, he saw a mysterious figure laying down beside him. Without turning his head, he tried to identify what the figure was. It was a human, a woman especially. And then he tried to observe it more closely to see her face with turning his head over. She had a black hair and wore a white dress covered in blood. And then he tried to look at her face, but he couldn't. Her face was very blurry and he couldn't see what her face looked like. There was no sign of life in that figure. He started to feel goosebumps. His fast reaction was he grabbed the figure tightly with his 2 hands and threw her onto the door. Now, during that moment while she was in the air, he saw briefly, slowly, that she turned into a bolster while she was in the air. And then she hits the door. Now, during that moment as well, 2 nurses came into the room and they saw what happened. And then they asked him, why did you throw the bolster away? And then he just simply asked, oh, there is something strange about the bolster. I will need to ask it to be moved away. And then, so they did that. After they did that, there was nothing strange happening in the room anymore, and he could sleep well. Now, fast forward to the next day at the morning. One of the nurses came back to the room and told him that he was using the same bolster that another patient used that died in the hospital as well. Now, after knowing the whole story, she then offered my father a discussion with a pastor, but of course he declined because he thought that was unnecessary. Now, there are more ghostly experiences that occurred to my father, and he told me not to be afraid of them. Sometimes you can see a glimpse of their world through a dimensional window, and you do not need to be afraid of them. That's it for me. Thanks for listening.